The story begins deep inside a dense, mysterious forest, where even sunlight struggles to reach the ground. There wasn't a single sign of civilization for miles. Hidden in this isolated wilderness, a small family lived a quiet, forgotten life. Every morning, the father would head into the forest with his young daughter and their loyal dog. Their daily routine was simple, but brutal. They survived by setting traps to catch wild animals. As he carefully placed fresh traps around the woods, he also checked the old ones, removing any animals that had already been caught. While working, he radioed his wife, Anne, using a portable transmitter. He told her he needed to go into town to buy food and other supplies they desperately needed. As the story unfolds, we learn why this family has been forced to live so far away from civilization. Hunting is their only source of income. They preserve the meat for themselves and sell the animal hides in the town market to earn just enough money to survive. Years of hardship have turned this dangerous lifestyle into both their identity and their only way of life. The father is determined to teach his daughter everything he knows, hoping she'll one day be able to carry on the responsibility. But the little girl wants nothing to do with killing animals. Her heart simply isn't in it. After several hours of work, the father and daughter return to inspect the traps they had set. One of them is completely empty. Whatever had been caught there has mysteriously disappeared. The little girl freezes in fear and quietly whispers, "Dad, it's back again." She isn't talking about an ordinary animal. She's referring to the savage wolf that keeps stealing their prey. Meanwhile, Anne arrives at the town market carrying a bundle of animal hides, hoping to earn enough money to buy essentials for the family. But luck isn't on her side. The demand for hides is low and prices have dropped dramatically. The shopkeeper coldly tells her that common animal skins are barely worth anything anymore. If she really wants good money, she needs to bring him the hide of a wolf. Hearing those words, Anne's heart sinks. She knows hunting a wolf is practically a death sentence. As she leaves the shop empty-handed, her eyes fall on a bulletin board filled with advertisements for rental homes and job openings. She stares at them for a long moment, as if dreaming of a completely different life. The truth is, Anne never wanted to live as a hunter. Her only dream is to escape this prison-like forest, settle into a small home in the city, and give her daughter the chance to attend a good school. A peaceful life Anne herself never had. On her way back home, she can't stop worrying about money. She has no idea how much longer they can survive on such a tiny income. When she finally arrives, she finds her husband teaching their daughter how to hunt. Without saying a word, Anne walks into the kitchen and quietly begins preparing dinner. A little later, while the family was having dinner, their daughter nervously asked, "Was today's catch stolen by that wolf too?" The moment she said it, Anne shot her husband a sharp look. She had already realized that the wolf wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It had become a serious threat. Anne warned him that if this kept happening, they'd have nothing left to sell. Their family was already struggling financially, and now this new problem was making things even worse. After dinner, their daughter quietly went to her room. As soon as she was gone, Anne brought the issue up again. Her husband tried to calm her down, saying that wild animals roaming through the forest was completely normal. The scent of trapped prey had probably attracted the wolf. But Anne wasn't convinced. She believed the wolf had already claimed this area as its territory and knew exactly where it could find easy meals trapped in their snares. She insisted they should ask someone for help, but her husband refused. Confidently, he promised that the very next morning, he'd put an end to the wolf once and for all. The next morning, he grabbed his rifle and headed into the forest to hunt it down. Their daughter begged to come along, and after enough pleading, he reluctantly agreed. When Anne found out, she was furious. She immediately radioed her husband, demanding that he send their daughter back home. He reassured her that everything was under control and promised that if he spotted even the slightest sign of the wolf, he'd send the girl home right away. Deep in the forest, they soon found fresh tracks. One look was enough for the father to know the animal couldn't be far away. He gave his daughter a few quick instructions and told her to head home alone. Before she left, he gave her one last message. "Tell your mom I'll be back before nightfall." Trying to hide her fear, the little girl started walking home. She acted brave on the outside, but every eerie sound echoing through the forest made her heart pound faster. Back at the cabin, Anne couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she returned from the river carrying water, she constantly felt as if invisible eyes were watching her every move. She hurried back home as fast as she could, but her daughter's situation was even worse. Overwhelmed by fear, the little girl froze halfway home and hid beneath a tree. The terrifying silence of the forest made it impossible for her to take another step. Meanwhile, her father continued tracking the wolf through the dark woods. Suddenly, he spotted movement behind a thick bush. Without hesitating, he raised his rifle, took aim, and fired. The gunshot echoed across the entire forest. Hearing it from a distance, the little girl smiled with relief. She assumed her father had killed the predator, gathered her courage, and sprinted toward home. But when the hunter reached the spot where he'd fired, his blood ran cold. The wolf was nowhere to be seen. Instead, lying on the ground was something far more horrifying. A severed human hand. The sight completely stunned him. This was no longer just about a wolf. Something far more sinister was hiding in those woods. But what he discovered on the other side of the forest shook him to his core. Scattered across the ground were the bodies of several young women. This wasn't the work of a wild animal. It was the horrifying cruelty of a human being. In that moment, he realized the real danger wasn't the forest at all. It was the monster who had dumped those bodies there. Suddenly, he couldn't stop thinking about his wife and daughter, who were home alone. Fighting a wolf was one thing, but facing a ruthless killer with both a gun and a calculating mind was a completely different battle. He returned home that evening, but the fear was written all over his face. Even so, he chose not to tell his wife or daughter what he had seen. He didn't want them living in constant terror. The next morning, when Anne woke up, her husband was gone. He had gone back to the place where he had found the bodies. Before leaving, he had only said one thing. If he was late getting back, they shouldn't worry. By now, he was far more determined to track down the mysterious killer than the wolf. Meanwhile, Anne and her daughter were washing clothes by the river when her daughter suddenly noticed that their dog was nowhere to be seen. She walked toward the bushes to look for it, but then, out of nowhere, the same wolf appeared right in front of them. It was dangerously close. Anne screamed and started making as much noise as she could, hoping to scare it away. Luckily, it worked. The wolf slowly backed off and disappeared into the forest. Anne and her daughter ran home as fast as they could, but in the chaos, they couldn't find their dog. After they got home, Anne grabbed a rifle and went back alone to search for it. A short distance away, she found the dog dead. The brutal condition of its body told her exactly what had happened. But when she returned home, she hid the truth from her daughter. Instead, she lied and said the dog still hadn't been found, hoping to spare the little girl even more heartbreak. The next morning, Anne's husband still hadn't returned. With no other choice, Anne took her daughter with her to check the hunting traps. Once again, one of the traps was empty. Then she noticed something lying on the ground. A ring. The moment she recognized it, the color drained from her face. It belonged to the man who had recently gone missing. Now she knew something far more sinister was happening. She rushed to the local police station. On the way, officers came across an abandoned car, but they dismissed it without giving it a second thought. At the station, Anne explained everything, including the wolf attacks. But the officers brushed her off, saying that living in the forest had been their own decision and that there was nothing they could do about the wolves. Disappointed and out of options, Anne returned home. Their food had run out, and with her husband still missing, she was forced to hunt a young deer just to feed her family. Even though she had no choice, taking its life filled her with guilt. That night, strange static and distorted voices suddenly crackled over the radio. Anne tried desperately to make contact, but all she heard was endless interference. Late that night, frantic screams echoed from outside the house. Startled, Anne and Ben rushed to the front door and found a badly injured man lying on the porch. Anne brought him inside, cleaned his wounds, and wrapped them as best she could. The stranger introduced himself as Lou, claiming he was a photographer. He said his car had broken down in the middle of the forest, and something out there had attacked him. His injuries were severe. Anne wanted to take him to the hospital, but after seeing how badly he was hurt, She realized he might not survive the trip and returned home instead. Days passed. Eventually, the police discovered the abandoned vehicle in the woods and launched an investigation. Meanwhile, Anne's husband never came back. With hope slipping away, Anne decided to search for him herself. Deep in the forest, she found his lifeless body. The sight shattered her completely. In that horrifying moment, she realized the truth. Lou had murdered her husband. Terrified, Anne ran back to the house. But the second she stepped inside, Lou attacked her. Lou quickly overpowered Anne, but just in time, police sirens echoed outside. Officers surrounded the house as Lou admitted that he was responsible for all the killings. During the struggle, Anne spotted a nearby animal trap and cleverly used it against him, giving herself the chance to fight back. In the end, Lou was finally captured. But for Anne, there was no happy ending. She had lost both her husband and her daughter, leaving her world completely destroyed. As police sirens faded into the silence of the forest, the story came to a heartbreaking close. For Anne, life would never be the same again. The home that once felt warm and safe now felt more like a cemetery filled with painful memories. After Lou was taken into custody, police searched the entire forest. What they uncovered was even more horrifying. Buried beneath the ground were traces of several other victims, revealing that this killer had been hunting people for years. Anne finally understood what had happened. Her husband hadn't died by chance. He had walked straight into Lou's trap. Lou wasn't just a photographer. He was a ruthless predator who hunted not only animals, but people as well. He had deliberately targeted Anne's husband because he believed he was getting dangerously close to uncovering his dark secret. Over the next few days, Anne was questioned repeatedly by detectives. Every question forced her to relive the nightmare she desperately wanted to forget. She had dreamed of leaving the city behind to build a better life, but now she had no one left. The news of her daughter's death left her emotionally numb. She spent her days sitting silently by the window, staring into the same forest that had stolen everything she loved. She couldn't stop thinking about one painful question. What if they had never opened the door to that wounded stranger? Maybe everything would have turned out differently. But by then, regret meant nothing. During the investigation, police made one final chilling discovery. Among Lou's belongings, they found a diary listing every victim he had ever hunted. Anne's family was on that list. Lou hadn't wanted to simply kill them. He wanted them to suffer. He knew Anne's husband was searching for him, and he enjoyed every second of the deadly game. When Anne learned the truth, her grief turned into a cold, burning rage. She wanted to face Lou one last time, to look him in the eyes and ask why he had destroyed her family. But the legal process never gave her that chance. A while later, Anne made the hardest decision of her life. She left the house forever. The land where she had spent so many years with her daughter had become a place she couldn't bear to stay in for even another second. It felt like death itself. The only thing she took with her were a few old photographs. Then she quietly walked away through the forest trail. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. The forest was still there, but something had changed. The terror that once haunted it was gone. All that remained was an overwhelming sense of emptiness. When Anne finally reached the city, the crowds and constant noise that she had once loved no longer brought her comfort. She realized the city wasn't all that different from the forest. Out there, she had run to save her life. Here, people spent their lives chasing things they could never truly keep. She rented a small apartment and found a quiet job. From that day on, she rarely spoke to anyone. The laughter that once filled her life had completely disappeared. Yet every morning she would glance at the old radio, the same one that had once connected her to her husband. Years passed, but time never healed her wounds. Some nights, she'd hear her daughter's laughter in her dreams and wake up in tears. She still couldn't believe that the man who had once promised her a better life in the city was no longer part of this world. She knew she had to move forward, but the past followed her like a shadow. She stopped expecting anything from life and simply survived one day at a time. Then one afternoon, while sitting alone in a park, she noticed a little boy laughing as he played with his mother. For a brief moment, she saw her own daughter in his smile. That's when she realized what life truly was. A few precious moments of happiness surrounded by endless pain. She gave the child a faint smile and quietly walked away. By then, there was no anger left inside her, no desire for revenge, only a strange sense of peace, the kind that comes after losing everything. The terrifying night in the forest, the wolves, the ruthless killer, all of it had slowly faded into distant memories. Anne never imagined she'd return to that forest again. But fate had other plans. 5 years later, she received a phone call. A memorial was being built in the forest to honor everyone who had lost their lives there. Anne was invited as the guest of honor. At first, she refused. But eventually, she realized this might be the farewell she had never truly had. When she returned, the forest looked completely different. New roads had been built, and visitors now came there without fear. Standing before the memorial, she slowly read every name engraved in the stone. When she reached the names of her husband and daughter, she gently placed her hand on them. And for the first time in years, she broke down and cried without holding anything back. As she stood there, it felt as though a heavy weight had finally lifted from her heart. She forgave the forest. She forgave herself. And she finally let go of the past. As the sun began to set, golden light streamed through the trees. Anne quietly walked away from the memorial. She no longer feared the forest. Instead, she accepted it as a part of who she had become. She stepped forward into a new chapter of her life, hoping that the days ahead would finally bring her the peace she had been searching for. Anne's story is one of survival, a mother's unconditional love, and an ending that reminds us just how fragile and unpredictable life can be. The forest still stands where it always has, but its fear no longer controls her. Her journey was finally complete. The people she lost could never come back. But what she found was something just as important. And with that, the story comes to an end. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Also, subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.